Just 20 minutes ago, we were sharing a plate of spaghetti. And now we find ourselves in a Hitchcock thriller. In this moment, there is nothing anthropomorphic about Tramp. There is just a dog responding to its instincts. It's what makes this scene so terrifying. And for that, we have the incredible animation skills of Disney's own crypt keeper, Woolie Reitherman, to thank. Rats, dinosaurs, whales, and headless horsemen, this man haunts your Disney dreams. But look what happens when we change the music back. The scene still makes my skin crawl, but at least it feels like Disney again. Lady and the Tramp was marketed as Walt Disney's Happiest motion picture, and to be honest, that almost feels like a disservice to the film. Overall, opinions seem to be all over the place when it comes to Disney's 15th animated feature. Rolling Stone places it at number 27 on their list of Disney's best, but Rotten Tomatoes puts it at number 13, right between The Lion King and Encanto. But before we get into what I believe makes this one of Disney's greatest all-time films, I think it's important to understand the uphill battle that Lady and the Tramp had to face upon its release. This was the first Disney film to feature a story developed in-house rather than adapting a well-known fairy tale, novel, or legend. It all began in the late 1930s when Disney story artist Joe Grant was developing a short story about his own spaniel, named Lady, feeling neglected after a new baby arrived. He pitched the story as an animated short, including some neighborhood scenes and a little bit of romance, all taken from a dog's eye point of view. For Walt Disney, a well-known dog lover, this was a story after his own heart, and he purchased the rights. Walt saw the potential for a feature-length animated film within the story, but realizing there was something missing, decided to shelve the project. It wasn't until years later, when the studio came across a story in a 1945 issue of Cosmopolitan magazine, that the wheels started turning again. The story, titled Happy Dan the Cynical Dog, was written by Ward Greene. It featured a streetwise mutt with a cocky, adventurous streak, a personality and setting very different from Joe Grant's sheltered lady. Walt saw that by combining Grant's homebound Cocker Spaniel with Greene's free-spirited stray, he could create the dramatic spark missing from Lady's original story. Disney would purchase the rights to Happy Dan and bring in Greene to collaborate on the film, where he would begin work on a novelization of the story. And this is where things get a little bit sticky. Joe Grant had been at the studio since 1933 and was one of Walt's top storymen. His original story about Lady was a personal and intimate idea drawn from his own life. When Happy Dan was introduced and merged with Lady's story in the mid-1940s, the tone shifted. Lady was no longer the sole focus, and the class-crossing boy from the other side of the tracks plot took shape. According to some accounts from studio colleagues, Grant felt his original concept was being altered beyond recognition. And in 1949, before the film had even gotten deep into production, Joe Grant left Disney. Officially, he resigned to pursue other work, but many biographers and Disney historians note that he left frustrated that his idea had been reworked without him, and that he wasn't even given screen credit when Lady and the Tramp was eventually completed. The film and its promotional materials feature Ward Greene's name prominently, with not so much as a mention of Joe Grant. When the film debuted on June 22, 1955, it was met with a fairly lukewarm response. The New York Times called it sentimental and sweet, but not one of Disney's best. And although still a financial success, it failed to live up to the two previous hits before it, Cinderella and Peter Pan. Other critics panned it as a woman's picture, full of romance and domestic strife, lacking the fantasy and action-packed male leads of previous films. So, of course, Disney's next film would feature a sword-wielding prince fighting a dragon. Course corrected. So snuggle up with your fur baby as we dig into why this beautifully animated, emotionally resonant film didn't land as strongly as it should have upon its original release. And if maybe, just maybe, a certain master of suspense was the inspiration for the whole thing. This is Lady and the Tramp.
Now, here is your host, Walt Disney.
Our first dog star was Pluto. A lot of you probably remember Pluto. Right now, I want you to meet the stars of our latest dog picture. Lady and the Tramp. Now, Lady and the Tramp has really been a fun picture to make. I remember another picture as being fun to make. That was Dumbo. Now, Lady and the Tramp has that same quality. It was an original story to start with, and as we made the picture and got to know the characters, we kept getting new ideas. And we had the full leeway to expand them because there wasn't any set storyline. Now, that's what I mean by this being a fun picture.
Did you know that Disney produced 2 different versions of Lady and the Tramp? And no, I'm not talking about the 2019 live-action remake, which, despite coming and going with very little fanfare, really wasn't that bad. It looks good, has a talented cast, and honestly feels more like a throwback to those Disney classics like The Incredible Journey and Homeward Bound. I think this movie would have done well in theaters. It just has a big screen feel to it. But I guess Disney never had any plans to release it anywhere but on Disney+. It feels like a missed opportunity. But that is not the second film I'm talking about. The major hype surrounding 1955's Lady and the Tramp was that it was set to be the first ever animated film shot in CinemaScope. Now, if you're not familiar with CinemaScope, it was a filmmaking process developed in the 1950s that used a specialized anamorphic lens to capture a wide field of view and then compress that image so it would fit on a 35mm roll of film. Then at the movie theater, another specialized lens would then stretch that image back out, often taking advantage of a wide, curved screen to better envelop the audience. This was the advent of the widescreen theater experience. But CinemaScope was hilariously wide for an animated film, making it a bold choice for Disney. Only 2 other Disney films were ever shot this wide: 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and Sleeping Beauty. I think you can make the argument that Sleeping Beauty was a better choice for this format. The scope of the story lends itself to this sort of look, but I still think it's overkill for an animated film. Yes, CinemaScope made Lady and the Tramp look more cinematic, but at a cost. It had a tendency to pull the audience further away from the characters in wide-angle shots, but then crop off parts of their bodies in the close-ups. This was what led to many of the less favorable reviews, with the film often being described as pretty but cold. And some of that may have been the psychological effect of the widescreen presentation on such a tender, small-scale story. So why did Disney do it? Well, the whole reason that widescreen movies even came into existence was due to the growing popularity of television. Movie producers wanted a way to really make their films stand out, to give people a reason to come to the theater. Think modern-day IMAX. And even though Disney was about to cash in with their groundbreaking television series, Disneyland, they had no intention of being left behind in Hollywood. Okay, I can hear some of you saying, "But Jay, I've watched this movie in the 4:3 aspect ratio." And you undoubtedly have. As many of us grew up in the age of the VCR, or with the wonderful world of Disney, just about all of our movies were cropped from their original format. These pan and scan versions were essentially a brand new cut of the film, where the original wide-angle release was zoomed in and cropped on the sides. And let me just tell you, directors hated this.
Pan and scan is when they try to make a widescreen film, a rectangle, fit into a square format on a television screen.
And that is, in a sense, technically, redirecting the movie.
What makes Lady and the Tramp so fascinating is that while Disney was creating the widescreen version, they were also producing their own second version of the film, restaging the scenes for the more traditional Academy aspect ratio. Since not all theaters were equipped for CinemaScope in 1955, Disney still wanted to have that second version available so that they could reach the largest possible audience. Would it have been cheaper to just lop the sides off of the widescreen version and call it good enough? Absolutely. But it just goes to show how dedicated Walt and his team were to ensuring that everyone received the best possible theater experience. Now, what is truly baffling about all this is that when it came time for the home video release of Lady and the Tramp, a new pan and scan version of the film was created from the original widescreen format, despite the fact that Disney had already created a version in that aspect ratio. The one exception being the 1998 Masterpiece Collection release on Laserdisc and VHS, which, well, good luck finding either of those. The Laserdisc in particular is extremely sought after. It contains the only digital copy of the Walt Disney approved Academy Aspect release of Lady and the Tramp.
This is Frank Thomas, one of our key animators. He's making the drawings that will animate part of the dialogue scene we have just heard recorded. He's not just making faces in the mirror for fun. He's mouthing the words as he hears them. Then he sketches the position of his mouth so that the character he's drawing will appear to be saying the words.
But at the heart of this film, and why it will always deserve to be praised,
well, let's see what we've got here now. By flipping these drawings, at the same time we play the record on the playback machine, we get a pretty fair idea of what we're going to see on the screen. I'll show you.
is the absolutely gorgeous animation.
What's a baby? What's a baby?
Now here's Trusty, the old bloodhound.
They're mighty sweet.
And here's Jock, the little Scotty.
I'm very, very soft.
This particular style, although we didn't know it at the time, was coming to an end. We would see one more film with these hand-inked, ultra-clean, bold black lines in Sleeping Beauty. But after that, we would begin the era of xerography with 101 Dalmatians.
What a day.
I talk about xerography in my Jungle Book video, so if you'd like to learn more about it, I encourage you to check that one out. Now, I could point to any number of shots in this film as a masterclass in animation. This moment where Tramp goes from perfectly imitating a human,
"Stop that racket, you'll wake the baby,"
to just being a dog again always delights me. But let's dive right into what could arguably be called the greatest scene ever in Disney animation. A scene that Walt Disney himself didn't think was possible.
I don't know that anybody else could have pulled this off like Frank Thomas did. I mean, he was the guy.
When it was on storyboards and Walt saw it, Walt didn't like it, or at least he didn't think it would work. So Frank took it on his own. He worked out the basic animation and it actually showed it to Walt to sell him on it.
He had that in his head. He just had to actually do it before other people could see it that way.
In the hands of a lesser animator, it would have been a horrible scene, but what Frank did was nothing short of miraculous.
Do you consider yourself a romantic?
Yes. Don't you? Aren't we all?
Frank Thomas, ladies and gentlemen. What's easy to forget is that even if you aren't a fan of dogs, you're still very familiar with them. You understand how they move and behave, how they interact with one another, and if the animators hadn't been able to get that right, this movie would have been a disaster. Take a look at this shot from The Fox and the Hound.
Hey, come on, let's scuffle. We ain't scuffled in a long time. Come on, Chief, let's have some fun.
Oh, lay off, Copper, you overgrown pup, you.
Does this feel like two dogs interacting? Sort of, I guess. But when you compare it to this shot, when Lady blames the Tramp for getting her sent to the pound, this feels like natural dog behavior. Tramp, who feels terrible, puts himself below Lady. This is a submissive behavior that dogs actually do when they feel sad or threatened. And I'm not trying to bag on The Fox and the Hound. That film had its own challenges that I'm sure I'll cover in a future video. No, this is more to illustrate what an absolute treasure we got in Lady and the Tramp. And in case you missed it, this little moment is your only clue as to where all those puppies come from at the end of the film. Disney would eventually release their standard collection of Disneyland records for Lady and the Tramp, but not until 1962. If you wanted to bring your furry friends home before then, you were purchasing the soundtrack from Decca Records. Peggy Lee, who along with Sonny Burke wrote and performed most of the songs in the film, was under contract with Decca, so they got first dibs. And if this sounds familiar, that's because the same thing happened with Pete's Dragon, where Helen Reddy was under contract with Capitol Records, so the original soundtrack release went through them. I don't have the Decca album in my collection, but it sounds like it featured studio versions of Lee's performances, as well as a few clips from the film's soundtrack. You had the Studio Cast Songs album, which I'm not a huge fan of. The re-recorded songs just feel flat, and overall the album is kind of a letdown. You wouldn't see an original Cast Songs album until 1981, which Disney released as a picture disc. And we'd have to wait until the 1997 compact disc to finally have a true soundtrack release, including the Oliver Wallace score. The Storyteller album features a top-notch cast of Disneyland record mainstays, including Ginny Tyler as Lady and Dal McKinnon as the Tramp.
Just then, another dog came into the yard. He was a pert fellow and walked up to us, bold as brass, and entered right into the conversation. He said his name was Tramp, and I saw he wore no collar nor license. Tramp practically ignored Jock and Trusty. He looked right at me and said,
"Hello, Pigeon. Couldn't help overhearing your conversation about babies. And I think these old fellas are steering you wrong. A baby's just a cute little bundle of trouble. They scratch, pinch, pull ears. But shucks, any dog can take that. It's what they do to your happy home. They're home wreckers, that's what they are."
"Look here, laddie, who are you to barge in and..."
"The voice of experience, Buster. Now, you just wait, Pigeon, until Junior gets here."
So, was Lady and the Tramp secretly Disney's take on a Hitchcock film? No, I don't think so. Although both men rose to prominence in Hollywood at the same time, they were never known to have much of an acquaintance with one another. In fact, some of you are probably already aware that Disney and Hitch had a bit of a falling out in the 1960s. After Walt saw Psycho, and let's just say he wasn't a fan, he refused to let Hitchcock shoot one of his upcoming films at Disneyland. That film, titled The Blind Man, was never produced. And many Hitchcock fans have long held a grudge against Walt Disney, feeling they were cheated out of another suspense masterpiece. In a fun twist, you can watch the 2012 film Hitchcock on Disney+, which is essentially a movie about how Psycho came to be. And even though they never worked together, both Hitchcock and Disney understood that sweetness becomes more powerful when contrasted with danger. At its heart, Lady and the Tramp is a conflicting tale about living a life full of adventure and risk versus the relative safety and comfort that comes with domestic living. Although he's no longer footloose and collar-free, the Tramp now finds himself at the beginning of a whole new adventure, parenthood. Oh yeah, did you know that Trusty didn't survive in the original cut of the film?
I thought as a kid that he was dead. I mean, I was really bawling. Because I thought, well, he's not going to live. You know, of course not. Look at this. He's dead.
Originally, Trusty was supposed to die. And Mother just was devastated. And she said it will upset the children much too much. And she sort of fought for it.
Careful now, man. Careful. It's a wee bit slippery. Yeah.
And there would eventually be one more happy ending as well, as Joe Grant would return to the Disney Studios in 1989.
Joe joined the studio again and contributed amazing ideas to films like Lion King and Pocahontas.
Things like the leaves swirling around Pocahontas.
My mother said, Carol, how would you like to get up every day of your life and do the thing you love most all day long? And that's my father.
The film came out almost 50 years ago, and Joe thought about the idea even earlier. So it's nice that now, after all this time, people know that it was Joe who really came up with the idea.
I hope you've enjoyed looking back at one of my all-time favorite Disney films. It's one of those movies that I wish I could watch entirely in its rough form. Just these beautiful pencil sketches bringing these dogs to life. If you haven't seen it in a while, I certainly recommend giving it another watch. I bet you'll notice something that you never caught before. So until next time, my name is Jay. Thanks for watching.